Listen to me very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you could save your life. Not your physical life, your eternal life. I don't care if you're watching this on your lunch break, in bed late at night, or scrolling through your phone trying to kill time. Stop everything right now and pay attention. My name is Robert. I'm 78 years old, and 40 minutes ago by heaven's clock, I was standing in front of Jesus Christ while my body lay dead on my kitchen floor. The doctors said it was impossible. The paramedics said they'd never seen anything like it. My own son thought he'd lost me forever. But I came back, and I came back with a message that's going to turn everything you think you know about 2026 and Donald Trump completely upside down. And I'm begging you, don't scroll past this. Your eternity might depend on what you're about to hear. I know what you're thinking. Here we go, another crazy old man with a wild story about heaven and politics. Another person trying to get attention by mixing religion with current events. But I need you to hear me out. This isn't about Republican or Democrat. This isn't about choosing political sides. What Jesus showed me about Trump, about 2026, about what's coming to America and the entire world, it has absolutely nothing to do with what you're hearing on the news. It's bigger than any election. It's deeper than any political party. It's about every single person watching this video right now, and whether you're ready for what's about to happen. And I promise you, no matter how much you think you don't know this. Before I tell you what I saw in those 40 minutes, before I reveal what Jesus Christ himself told me about Donald Trump and why 2026 is the most critical year in modern history, you need to understand who I was before I died. Because I wasn't some super spiritual prophet. I wasn't a pastor or a monk or someone who spent their whole life seeking God. I was just a regular man who went to church on Sundays, said grace before dinner, and thought that was enough. I was spiritually asleep, and I didn't even know it. Jesus told me that millions of people are in the same condition right now, going through the motions of faith while completely missing the point. And he sent me back to wake them up before it's too late. I've lived my whole life in a small town in the Midwest. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where you can leave your doors unlocked, where Friday night football games are the biggest events of the week. I was born in 1947, right after the war ended. My daddy worked at the factory. My mama kept house and raised 4 kids. I was the oldest. Life was simple back then. We didn't have much money, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. I married my sweetheart Linda when I was 22 years old. She was 19, fresh out of high school, prettiest girl in 3 counties. We built a life together in that same small town where I grew up. Had 2 boys, watched them grow up and have families of their own. Worked 40 years at the lumber mill until my back couldn't take it anymore and I retired. Linda and I had 52 good years together. We had our fights like any couple does, had our struggles when money got tight, had our heartbreaks when we lost our youngest boy to cancer when he was only 35. But we had each other, and we had our faith, or at least we thought we did. We went to the same church for decades, sat in the same pew every Sunday, knew all the hymns by heart. I served as a deacon for a while. Linda taught Sunday school. We were what you'd call pillars of the community. Good Christian folks. But looking back now, after what I've seen, I realize we were just playing church. We knew about God, but we didn't really know God. We believed in Jesus, but we didn't have a real relationship with him. We were going through the motions, checking the boxes, thinking that was enough to get us to heaven. Everything changed 4 years ago when Linda had a stroke. We were sitting at the breakfast table on a Tuesday morning. She was talking about needing to go to the grocery store, and mid-sentence she just stopped. Her face went slack on one side. The coffee cup fell out of her hand and shattered on the floor. I called 911, rode with her in the ambulance, sat in that hospital waiting room praying harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. But she never woke up. 3 days later, she was gone. Just like that. 52 years together. And suddenly I was alone. The funeral was big. The whole town showed up. People brought casseroles and kind words. But when everyone went home and the house got quiet, I realized I didn't know how to live without her. For 4 years after Linda died, I just existed. I wasn't really living. I'd wake up in the morning and forget for a second that she was gone, then reality would hit me like a truck. I'd make coffee for 2 out of habit, then pour hers down the sink. I'd turn to tell her something and remember nobody was there. The loneliness was crushing, but worse than the loneliness was the emptiness. I kept going to church because that's what I'd always done. I'd sit in that same pew, now by myself, and sing the same hymns. But my heart wasn't in it anymore. I was angry at God for taking Linda. I was confused about why he'd let her suffer. I was going through the motions because I didn't know what else to do. Faith had become just a habit, something I did on Sundays without really thinking about it. I prayed, but my prayers felt like they bounced off the ceiling. I read my Bible sometimes, but the words didn't mean much. I was spiritually dead, and I didn't even realize it. My days all blurred together. I'd wake up around 7, make breakfast, watch the morning news. I'd putter around the house, fixing things that didn't need fixing just to have something to do. My son David would call once a week to check on me. He'd invite me over for dinner with his family, and I'd go sometimes, but I always felt like I was intruding on their lives. They had their own world, their own busy schedules. I was just the lonely old man they felt obligated to include. Tuesdays I'd go to the diner downtown and have lunch with a couple of other widowers. We'd talk about the weather and complain about our aching joints and argue about sports. Thursdays I'd go to the senior center and play cards. Sundays I'd go to church. And the rest of the time I'd sit in my recliner watching television, waiting to die so I could see Linda again. That was my life. Empty. Repetitive. Meaningless. I thought I was ready to die. I thought when my time came, I'd welcome it. I had no idea how wrong I was. March 15, 2025, started like any other day. I woke up that morning feeling strange, but I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong. It wasn't pain exactly, more like a heaviness in the air, like the feeling you get before a storm rolls in. I shook it off. When you're 78 years old, you wake up feeling strange more often than not. Your body doesn't work like it used to. Aches and pains are just part of the deal. I made my coffee and toast, sat down at the kitchen table, and turned on the news. They were talking about politics like they always were, arguing about Trump and the next election and all the chaos in Washington. I barely paid attention. I'd stopped caring about politics years ago. It all seemed like a circus, people yelling at each other and nothing ever changing. I finished my breakfast, washed my dishes, and decided to work in the garage for a while. I had an old workbench out there where I'd tinker with small projects, nothing important, just little things to keep my hands busy. Around noon, I came back inside to make lunch. That's when I felt it, a tightness in my chest that wasn't normal. I'd had heartburn before, but this was different. Sharper. Deeper. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to catch my breath, but the tightness just got worse. My left arm started to tingle, then went completely numb. That's when I knew. This was a heart attack. Fear shot through me like ice water in my veins. I tried to stand up to get to the phone, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The room started spinning. The pain in my chest exploded into something unbearable, like someone was crushing my ribs with their bare hands. I managed to knock the phone off the table, but I couldn't pick it up. My hands wouldn't work. My vision started to blur. I could hear myself gasping for air, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get enough oxygen. The edges of my vision went dark, closing in like a tunnel. My last thought before everything went black was pure terror. I'm dying. I'm dying alone in my kitchen and nobody's here. I'm not ready. Oh God, I'm not ready. Then the pain stopped. Just like that. Completely. Instantly. 1 second I was drowning in agony, my chest being crushed, unable to breathe. The next second, nothing. No pain at all. And that's when I realized I wasn't in my kitchen anymore. I was standing upright, strong, without the cane I'd needed for the past 5 years. My back didn't hurt. My knees didn't ache. I felt better than I'd felt in decades. I looked down at my hands and my breath caught in my throat. These weren't my hands. They couldn't be. No liver spots. No wrinkles. No swollen knuckles from arthritis. These were young hands, strong hands, the hands I had when I was 30 years old. What in the world? I touched my face and felt smooth skin instead of sagging jowls. I ran my fingers through my hair and felt a full, thick head of it instead of the thin, wispy strands I'd had for years. None of this made sense. I stood there in complete shock, staring at my hands, touching my face, trying to understand what was happening to me. The last thing I remembered was collapsing in my kitchen, the crushing pain in my chest, the feeling of dying alone on the cold floor. But now there was no pain. There was no kitchen. There was no floor beneath my feet, at least not one I could see or describe in normal terms. I was standing on something solid, but it looked like I was standing on light itself, like the air had become firm enough to hold me up. Everything around me glowed with this soft, warm brightness that didn't hurt my eyes but let me see everything with perfect clarity. The colors were impossible to describe because they weren't colors we have on Earth. There were golds that seemed to hum with music, blues that felt like peace, silvers that whispered comfort. The air itself felt alive, like it was breathing with me, holding me, welcoming me. I knew without anyone telling me that I had crossed over into somewhere beyond the physical world. Where am I? I said out loud, and my voice sounded different. It was clearer, stronger, younger. It echoed in this space but didn't bounce back harshly. It just spread out like ripples on water. I turned in a slow circle, trying to take everything in, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There were no walls, no ceiling, no boundaries that I could identify. Just this endless expanse of living light that stretched in every direction. And the silence, it wasn't empty or scary. It was full, like the whole universe was holding its breath, waiting for something important to happen. My heart should have been racing with fear, but instead I felt this overwhelming sense of calm. Whatever this place was, it didn't feel threatening. It felt like coming home after being lost for a very long time. I should have been terrified. I should have been panicking. But I wasn't. I felt more at peace than I had felt in years, maybe in my entire life. Robert. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It wasn't loud, but it filled everything. It resonated not just in my ears but in my chest, in my bones, in the very core of who I was. The sound of it made me want to fall down and worship, but it also made me want to run forward like a child running to their father. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, and it carried a weight of authority that made me know instantly that whoever was speaking had the right to command every living thing in existence. My knees went weak. Every hair on my arms stood up. Tears filled my eyes without me understanding why. I knew that voice. Not because I'd heard it before with my physical ears, but because something deep in my spirit recognized it. This was the voice that spoke the universe into existence. This was the voice that calmed storms and raised the dead. This was the voice I'd sung about in church for 70 years but never actually expected to hear. I turned slowly, almost afraid to look, and there he was. Jesus. Standing about 20 feet away from me, and the moment I saw him, everything else disappeared. All the questions about where I was and what had happened and whether I was dead or dreaming, all of it just vanished. Because nothing mattered except him. He was more real than anything I'd ever seen in my entire life. Every tree, every mountain, every person I'd ever known felt like a shadow compared to the solid reality of Jesus standing in front of me. He wasn't glowing exactly, but light came from him, through him, like he was the source of all light and it couldn't be contained. His eyes, oh his eyes, they looked right through me and saw everything. Every lie I'd ever told. Every selfish thought I'd ever had. Every time I'd chosen my own way instead of his. Every Sunday I'd sat in church thinking about lunch instead of worship. He saw it all, and I knew he saw it all, and I wanted to run and hide but I couldn't move. His face was kind but serious, gentle but strong. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on any human face, like perfect love and perfect justice existing in the same moment. There was no condemnation in his eyes, but there was truth, raw and unavoidable truth that made me see myself exactly as I was. And what I saw made me ashamed. I'd wasted so much time. I'd spent 70 years claiming to follow him while barely knowing him. I'd treated faith like a hobby instead of a relationship. I'd been content with religion when he was offering me something real, something transformative, something that would have changed everything if I'd only taken it seriously. I fell to my knees, not because anyone told me to, but because standing felt impossible. My whole body shook. Tears poured down my face. I couldn't form words. All I could do was kneel there and weep like a child who'd disappointed their father and finally understood what they'd done. Lord, I finally managed to choke out. Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasted it. I wasted all of it. I went to church my whole life and I never really knew you. I said your name 1,000 times, but I never really talked to you. I read about you, but I never let you change me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The words tumbled out between sobs, and I couldn't stop them. 78 years of shallow faith, of going through the motions, of knowing about God without actually knowing God, it all came crashing down on me at once. I'd been a fool. I'd had the truth right in front of me my entire life, and I'd treated it like background noise. I'd had access to the creator of the universe, and I'd settled for 1 hour a week of polite religion. And now here I was, standing before him, completely exposed, with nothing to offer but apologies and regret. I expected him to be angry. I expected him to tell me I'd missed my chance, that I should have taken him seriously when I had time. But that's not what happened. Robert, he said my name again, and this time his voice was so tender it broke something open inside me. Look at me. I lifted my head, tears still streaming down my face, and met his eyes. And what I saw there wasn't anger or disappointment. It was love, pure, overwhelming, undeserved love that didn't make any sense. How could he look at me like that after seeing everything I'd done and failed to do? How could there be such kindness in his eyes when I deserved judgment? He stepped closer and reached out his hand toward me. I hesitated, feeling unworthy to touch him, but he waited patiently until I lifted my shaking hand and placed it in his. The moment our hands touched, warmth flooded through me, not physical heat but something deeper. It felt like every good thing I'd ever experienced was concentrated into that single point of contact. It felt like being forgiven and accepted and loved all at the same time. It felt like coming home after being lost in the cold for my entire life. He helped me to my feet, and we stood facing each other. I was still crying, but the tears had changed from grief to something else, something I couldn't quite name. Relief maybe, or wonder, or gratitude so deep it hurt. You're here now, he said gently, and that's what matters. But Robert, you need to understand something. You're not staying. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I whispered. Am I going to hell? Is that why I'm here, so you can tell me I didn't make it? A small sad smile crossed his face. No, Robert. You belong to me. You gave your heart to me when you were 12 years old at that summer revival meeting. You meant it then, even if you forgot what it meant later. You're mine, and nothing can take you out of my hand. But I'm sending you back because I have something I need you to do. Back. I looked at him in confusion. Back where? Back to your kitchen floor, he said. Back to your body. Back to your life. Your son is about to walk through your front door. He came to check on you because something told him he needed to. The paramedics are 3 minutes away. They're going to work on you for a long time, and the doctors are going to call it a miracle. But before you go back, I need you to see something. I need you to understand what's really happening in the world you're about to return to. Why me? The question came out as barely a whisper. I'm nobody, Lord. I'm just an old man who wasted most of his life. Why would you send me back with a message? Who's going to listen to me? He looked at me with those eyes that saw everything, and his answer was simple, but it shattered every excuse I had. Because you finally understand what you missed. Because you've seen the difference between religion and relationship. Because you represent millions of people who sit in churches every Sunday thinking they know me when they don't. And because you're willing. I don't need the famous or the powerful, Robert. I need the humble and the obedient. Will you do this for me? Will you go back and tell them what I'm about to show you? I nodded, unable to speak. Yes, Lord. Whatever you want. I'll do it. Show me. He smiled then, a real smile that lit up everything around us, and suddenly the space we were standing in began to change. The light shifted and expanded. What had been formless brightness began to take shape, and I realized we were moving, or the world was moving around us. I couldn't tell which. Robert, he said as the transformation continued, what I'm about to show you will be hard to understand with your human mind. You're going to see things that exist beyond your physical senses. You're going to see the spiritual reality that's always been there but hidden from human eyes. Don't be afraid. I'm right here with you, and I'll help you understand what it means. Are you ready? I swallowed hard and nodded. I'm ready. Then watch, he said. Watch and understand what's really happening in the world, what's coming in 2026, and why Donald Trump is at the center of a battle he doesn't even fully comprehend. The scene around us shifted completely, and suddenly we were no longer in that space of light. We were somewhere else entirely, looking down at something that made my breath catch in my throat. We were above the earth, but not in the way an airplane flies above it. We were in some higher dimension, some elevated perspective where I could see not just the physical planet but the spiritual reality that surrounded it. And what I saw made me understand that everything I thought I knew about the world was just the surface of something much deeper and much more terrible. From where we stood, I could see the entire earth spread out below us like a living map. Cities twinkled like scattered diamonds across the dark continents. Oceans moved in slow rhythms. Clouds drifted in patterns that looked almost purposeful. It was beautiful, breathtaking in a way that made me understand why astronauts who see Earth from space often come back changed. But Jesus wasn't showing me this view to admire the beauty. He was showing me something else, something hidden beneath the surface that humans weren't meant to see with physical eyes. He touched my eyes gently, just a brush of his fingers across my eyelids, and suddenly everything changed. What I saw next made me gasp and step back in horror. The beautiful planet I'd been looking at a moment before was now covered in shadows, dark writhing masses that moved like living things across the surface. They weren't solid, more like smoke or fog, but they had purpose and direction. They clustered in some areas so thick you could barely see the light beneath them. In other places they were scattered and thin. But they were everywhere, covering the earth like a plague. What are those things? My voice shook as I asked the question, though part of me already knew the answer. I could feel the evil coming off them even from this distance, a cold, malevolent presence that made my skin crawl. Jesus stood beside me, his face grave and sad. Those are demons, Robert. Fallen angels who chose to rebel against my Father and now spend their time trying to destroy what he loves most. Humanity. They've been here since the beginning, whispering lies, planting seeds of doubt, turning people away from truth and toward destruction. Most people don't believe they exist anymore. They think demons are just fairy tales or metaphors for human evil. But they're real, and they're more active now than they've been in generations. They know their time is running short, so they're working harder than ever to drag as many souls to hell as they can before the end comes. I watched in growing horror as these shadow creatures moved across the earth. They seemed to be drawn to certain places, clustering thick over major cities, hovering over government buildings, swarming around places I recognized as centers of media and entertainment. Look closer, Jesus said, and suddenly our perspective shifted. We zoomed in like a camera focusing, and I found myself looking at individual people going about their daily lives. What I saw made me want to weep. Almost every person I looked at had at least one of those shadow creatures attached to them. Some had small ones, barely visible wisps that clung to their shoulders or whispered in their ears. Others were completely covered, wrapped in layers of darkness so thick I could barely see the person underneath. The demons moved with them, followed them, influenced them in ways the people didn't even recognize. I watched a woman sitting at her kitchen table scrolling through her phone. A small shadow creature perched on her shoulder, whispering things I couldn't hear but could see the effect of. Her face hardened with jealousy as she looked at pictures of her friend's vacation. The demon fed that jealousy, encouraged it, turned it into bitterness and resentment. The woman didn't hear the whisper, but she responded to it, her thoughts turning dark and cruel without understanding where those thoughts were coming from. I watched a man driving his car, stuck in traffic. A larger shadow wrapped around his head, feeding him thoughts of rage and frustration. The man's face twisted with anger. He honked his horn and screamed at the car in front of him, working himself into a fury over something that didn't matter. The demon grew larger as the anger increased, feeding on it like fuel. I watched a teenage boy alone in his bedroom, staring at his computer screen. Multiple shadows surrounded him, blocking out almost all the light. They whispered thoughts of worthlessness and despair, and I could see the boy's shoulders slump as hopelessness settled over him like a blanket. He thought those thoughts were his own. He had no idea he was under attack. Do they know? I asked Jesus, my voice barely above a whisper. Do people know these things are attacking them? Most don't, he answered sadly. The enemy's greatest weapon is invisibility. If people don't believe demons exist, they never fight back. They just accept the thoughts and feelings as their own and let themselves be led toward destruction without ever realizing they're being manipulated. That's why so many people feel hopeless and angry and confused right now. They're not just dealing with their own problems. They're dealing with spiritual attacks they don't even know are happening. The view shifted again, and this time I saw something that shocked me even more than the demons attached to individual people. We were looking at churches now, hundreds of them scattered across America. Buildings with crosses on top, parking lots full of cars, people streaming in for Sunday services. Surely here the light would be stronger, I thought. Surely in the houses of God these shadow creatures couldn't enter. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. Many of the churches I looked at were just as full of darkness as the streets outside. The demons moved freely through the buildings, sat in the pews next to worshipers, stood behind pastors and pulpits, wove through choir members and ushers and Sunday school teachers. In some churches the darkness was so thick it seemed to suffocate the few points of light that remained. How? The word came out as a choked cry. How can they be in your church, Lord? How can they be in the place where people come to worship you? Jesus turned to look at me, and the sorrow in his eyes was almost unbearable to witness. Because many of these buildings are not my church, Robert. They carry my name on their signs. They sing songs that mention me. They preach sermons that quote scripture. But I'm not welcome there anymore. They've replaced me with programs and entertainment and feel-good messages that never challenge anyone to actually change. They've created a version of Christianity that requires nothing, costs nothing, and transforms nothing. It's religion without relationship, and it's worse than no religion at all because it makes people think they're right with God when they're not. He showed me one large church where the worship band played loud music and lights flashed like a concert. The people raised their hands and sang along, but their minds were elsewhere. Some were thinking about what to eat for lunch. Others were mentally reviewing their to-do lists for the week. A few were genuinely trying to connect with God, but the noise and distraction made it almost impossible. The pastor preached a sermon about God's love and acceptance, but he never mentioned sin or repentance or the cost of following Jesus. He never challenged anyone to actually change their lives. The message was comfortable, safe, designed not to offend anyone. And the demons loved it. They settled in among the congregation like they owned the place, content to let people believe they were saved while living the exact same way as people who didn't know God at all. Jesus showed me another church, smaller and more traditional. The people sat in straight rows singing old hymns from worn hymnals. Everything was proper and orderly and respectable. But their hearts were far away. They performed Christianity like actors in a play, hitting all the right marks, saying all the right words, but feeling none of it. Some of them had been coming to this church for 50 years and still didn't know Jesus personally. They knew about him, could recite facts about his life and death, but they'd never had a real conversation with him. They'd never experienced his presence or felt his love or allowed him to transform them from the inside out. It was all just habit and tradition and social obligation. And once again, the demons were there, comfortable and undisturbed, keeping people trapped in dead religion so they'd never discover what real faith actually meant. Lord, I whispered, shame flooding through me as I recognized myself in what I was seeing. That was me. I spent 70 years going to church just like that. I knew all the songs and all the prayers, but I didn't know you. I was asleep the whole time and didn't even realize it. I know, Robert, he said gently, placing his hand on my shoulder. That's exactly why you're here. You represent millions of people who think they're ready to meet me but aren't. People who've built their entire faith on Sunday attendance and moral behavior without ever entering into actual relationship with me. And I'm giving you a chance to go back and wake them up before it's too late, before they stand before me on Judgment Day and hear me say I never knew you. The scene shifted once more, and this time we were looking at America as a whole. The nation glowed brighter than the others around it. pulsing with two different kinds of energy that seemed to be fighting for dominance. One was golden, warm, and alive, flowing through certain areas like rivers of light. The other was dark gray, cold and heavy, spreading like oil across the landscape. The two energies collided and pushed against each other in a battle that covered the entire country. This nation, Jesus said, his voice heavy with meaning, was founded with purpose. Not to be perfect, because no nation created by imperfect humans can be perfect, but to be a light. To remind the world that true freedom comes from me, not from governments or kings or human systems. But that purpose has been forgotten. The light has been dimming for decades, and now it's barely visible in some places. I watched as the golden and gray energies swirled through cities and towns. Wherever the gold touched, people softened. They forgave each other. They helped neighbors. They prayed. They turned toward truth and light. Wherever the gray touched, division grew. Families split apart over political arguments. Friends became enemies. Fear and anger and hatred spread like wildfire. The two forces were locked in a battle for the soul of America, and from where I stood I could see that the outcome wasn't decided yet. It could still go either way. In 2026, Jesus said, and his voice took on a tone of urgency that made me pay even closer attention, this battle is going to reach a tipping point. Events will unfold that will force every person in this nation to choose which side they're on. Not political sides, spiritual sides. Will they choose fear or faith? Division or unity? Hate or love? The choice they make will determine not just the future of America but the future of their own souls. And right in the middle of this battle, standing at the center of the storm, there's a man everyone is talking about but almost no one really understands. The scene narrowed and focused, and suddenly I was looking at a single figure standing alone while chaos swirled around him. I recognized him immediately. Donald Trump. He stood in the center of massive crowds that stretched in every direction, some cheering his name, others screaming in rage. Signs waved. Fists pumped in the air. Voices created a deafening roar of support and hatred mixed together in equal measure. But from this elevated perspective, looking at it through spiritual eyes, I could see something that shocked me. The love and the hate looked exactly the same. Both sides were consumed by the same passionate energy, just pointed in different directions. Those who loved him had made him into an idol, looking to him to save America as if any human could do what only God can do. Those who hated him had made him into a demon, blaming him for every problem as if one man had that much power. Both sides were wrong because both sides were looking at Trump instead of looking at God. "What do you see, Robert?" Jesus asked me. "I see a man," I said slowly, trying to put into words what I was understanding. "A man that everyone is fighting about. A man who divides people. But Lord, I don't understand. Is he good or evil? Is he your servant or your enemy? Look deeper," Jesus said. "Look with the eyes I've given you." I focused harder on the figure of Trump standing in the center of the storm. And then I saw it. He wasn't creating the division. He was revealing it. Like a mirror held up to America's soul, he reflected back what was already there. The pride, the fear, the hunger for power, the anger that had been building for years. But also the hunger for truth, for change, for someone who would say what others were afraid to say. Trump was like a catalyst, speeding up reactions that were already happening, bringing to the surface things that had been hidden underneath. He is a mirror, Jesus said. And a catalyst. Not a savior and not a villain. Just a man being used for purposes larger than he understands. As I watched, I saw Trump holding something in his hands. It looked like a torch, but the flame kept changing colors. Sometimes it burned bright gold, pure and strong. Other times it flickered to dark gray, unstable and dangerous. The flame responded to Trump's choices, his words, his actions, his heart. When he spoke truth, when he stood for what was right even at personal cost, the flame burned gold. When he acted out of pride or ego or desire for revenge, the flame turned gray. He had the power to influence millions, but he didn't fully understand the weight of what he carried. "What does that mean?" I asked. "What is he carrying?" "Influence," Jesus answered. "Authority. The ability to shape how millions of people think and act." The question is not whether he will lead, because he's already leading whether he wants to or not. The question is whether he will lead people toward me or toward himself. Whether he'll use his influence to point people to truth or to feed his own glory. And that choice, Robert, is still being made. Every day he chooses. Every word he speaks tips the balance one way or the other. Pray for him. Don't worship him. Don't demonize him. Pray for him, because the weight he carries is greater than any human should bear alone. In 2026, Jesus continued, his voice growing more intense. Events will unfold that will test every heart in this nation. Not just Trump's heart. Not just the hearts of political leaders. Every single heart. Yours. Your children's. Your neighbors. Everyone will be forced to decide what they really believe and who they really trust. The scene expanded, and I saw the numbers 2026 written across the sky in letters that seemed to burn. Beneath those numbers, images began to flash by rapidly like a movie playing at high speed. I saw massive gatherings of people in cities across America. Not riots but passionate assemblies. Some groups were praying, on their knees in parking lots and public squares. Others were protesting, demanding change, searching desperately for answers. Everyone looking for something to hold on to in the middle of chaos. I saw a moment of great confusion where the media, the government, and even church leaders were all giving different messages. People didn't know who to trust or what to believe. The conflicting information left ordinary citizens feeling lost and betrayed, not knowing which way to turn. I saw an unexpected event, though I couldn't see the details clearly. It felt like an earthquake, but not of the ground. An earthquake of systems and institutions. Something that would shake things people thought were solid and permanent, revealing that they were built on sand all along. And through it all, running like a thread of gold through darkness, I saw something beautiful. People waking up. Not to politics or religion, but to real relationship with God. I saw men and women on their knees in their living rooms, finally praying with honest hearts instead of memorized words. I saw churches emptying of dead religion and filling with genuine worship. I saw neighbors helping each other instead of arguing about politics. I saw the golden energy growing stronger, pushing back the gray, reclaiming ground that had been lost. It was like watching a sleeping giant finally wake up and remember who it was. What people don't understand, Jesus said, is that 2026 is not about Trump. He's just one piece on a board much larger than anyone realizes. 2026 is about humanity's choice. America's choice. The choice between fear and faith. Between trusting in human leaders to save them or finally turning back to me. Then he showed me something that made my heart race. Two different timelines branching out from 2026 like roads splitting in different directions. In one timeline, the golden energy overwhelmed the gray. People stopped fighting each other and started fighting for each other. Churches stopped performing religion and started experiencing my presence, Jesus said. Trump, along with every other leader, either surrendered to God's will or was moved aside. Peace came, not through politics or programs, but through millions of individual hearts choosing love over hate, forgiveness over revenge, faith over fear. In that timeline, America fulfilled its original purpose and became a light to other nations once again. In the other timeline, the gray energy grew and spread like cancer. Division intensified until it turned violent. The nation tore itself apart from the inside, families destroyed, friendships ruined, cities burning. And Trump, along with every other political leader, became irrelevant because chaos recognizes no master. In that timeline, America collapsed under the weight of its own pride and hatred, and the darkness celebrated its victory. Which one will happen? I asked, my voice shaking with the weight of what I'd seen. Which timeline is real? Jesus looked at me with eyes that held both hope and warning. Both are possible, Robert. The future is not set in stone because humans have free will. The timeline that unfolds depends on choices that haven't been made yet. It depends on whether my people, the ones who claim my name, will finally wake up and take me seriously. If they do, if they truly surrender and become the light I've called them to be, then the first timeline happens. But if they keep sleeping, keep fighting over politics while ignoring their own spiritual condition, keep trusting in human solutions to spiritual problems, then the second timeline unfolds. And Robert, I need you to understand something. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze made everything else disappear. His hands gripped my shoulders, and I felt the weight of his words settling into my very soul like stones dropping into deep water. This is why you're here, Margaret, Jesus said, and I realized he'd called me by the wrong name, but then I understood he was speaking about all of us, everyone who would hear this message, not just me specifically. This is what I need you to tell them when you go back. Tell them Donald Trump is not their enemy, and he is not their savior. He is a man, flawed and complicated, being used by me for purposes even he doesn't fully understand. Tell them to stop making idols out of politicians. Tell them to stop putting their hope in elections and political parties as if those things could save their souls or fix what's broken in their hearts. Tell them to pray for Trump, genuinely pray for him, not with hatred or worship, but with the understanding that he carries a burden no human should carry alone. Pray that he chooses wisely. Pray that he points people toward me instead of toward himself. Pray that the torch he carries burns gold instead of gray. But don't make him into something he's not. He's not the Messiah, and he's not the Antichrist. He's just a man standing at a crossroads, and the choices he makes will ripple through millions of lives. Tell them that 2026 will be a year of shaking, Jesus continued, his voice growing more urgent with each word. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken. Everything built on sand instead of solid rock will collapse. But this is not punishment, Robert. This is mercy. I am shaking loose everything that's false so that only what's real remains. I'm tearing down the facade so people can finally see the truth they've been avoiding. The shaking will be uncomfortable, even frightening for some, but it's necessary. You can't build something new until you clear away what's broken and rotting. Tell them to stop trusting in political parties that change with every election. Tell them to stop trusting in media narratives that are designed to manipulate rather than inform. Tell them to stop trusting in charismatic leaders who make big promises but can't deliver what only I can give. Tell them to trust in me alone, because I'm the only one who will never fail them, never lie to them, never abandon them when things get difficult. Everything else will eventually let them down, but I never will. Tell them the greatest move of God in human history is not coming through the White House or any government building, Jesus said, and I could hear the passion building in his voice. It's coming through ordinary people who finally decide to take me seriously. Through mothers praying over their children. Through fathers who choose integrity over convenience. Through young people who refuse to go along with the crowd and instead stand for truth even when it costs them friendships. Through elderly saints who've been praying for decades and are about to see the breakthrough they've been believing for. The revival that's coming won't start with famous preachers or powerful politicians. It will start in living rooms and workplaces and quiet moments of surrender when someone finally says, God, I'm done doing this my way. I'm ready to do it yours. Those are the people who will change the world. Those are the ones who will push back the darkness and let the light flood in. Tell them that comfortable Christianity is over. The time for playing church and pretending is finished. I'm calling my true followers to rise up, the ones who will love when it costs them something, forgive when it hurts, speak truth when it's unpopular, and shine light into darkness even when the darkness fights back. And Robert, his voice softened and he looked at me with such tenderness that I felt tears filling my eyes again. Tell them I love them more than they can possibly comprehend. I didn't just say nice words about loving humanity. I proved it by dying for them. I left heaven, put on human flesh, lived a perfect life they couldn't live, and then took the punishment they deserved so they could have the relationship with God they were created for. I did all of that because I love them. And right now, at this very moment, I'm preparing a place for them in my Father's house, a place beyond anything they can imagine, where there's no more pain or sadness or death or loneliness. But they have to choose me. Really choose me. Not just agree that I exist or add me to their list of good things they believe in. They have to surrender their whole lives to me, give me control, let me transform them from the inside out. They can't keep living however they want and just expect me to rubber stamp it. Real relationship requires real surrender. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Do you understand the message you're taking back? Yes, Lord, I said, though my voice was shaking. I understand. But I have to be honest with you. I'm scared. I'm 78 years old. I'm nobody important. I don't have a big platform or a lot of influence. Who's going to listen to an old man telling a crazy story about dying and meeting Jesus and seeing visions about Trump in 2026? They're going to think I've lost my mind. They're going to say I hallucinated from lack of oxygen or that I'm making it up for attention. How can I possibly do what you're asking? Jesus smiled at me, and that smile carried so much warmth and confidence that my fear began to melt away. Robert, I don't need the famous or the influential or the powerful. I never have. I built my church through fishermen and tax collectors and ordinary people that the world overlooked. I've always chosen the weak and foolish things of the world to shame the wise and strong. You're exactly who I need because you're willing and obedient. You'll reach exactly who you're meant to reach. Some will mock you, yes. Some will dismiss you. But others will hear the truth in your words and their lives will change forever. That's all that matters. You don't need to convince everyone. You just need to be faithful to deliver the message I've given you. Suddenly, I felt a pulling sensation, like a rope tied around my chest was being tugged backward. The pulling grew stronger, more insistent, and I knew what it meant. My time here was ending. It's time, Jesus said, confirming what I already felt. Your son just pulled into your driveway. He had a feeling he needed to check on you today, so he left work early. He's walking up to your front door right now. The paramedics got a call from your neighbor who saw your son's panicked reaction when he found you. They're 2 minutes away. Wait, I said, panic flooding through me as the pulling grew even stronger. I have so many questions. There's so much I still don't understand. What about my wife Linda? Is she here? Will I see her again? What happens after 2026? How long do I have to share this message? What if I forget the details? What if I say it wrong? Jesus reached out and placed both hands on my face, and immediately peace washed over me like warm water. The questions didn't go away, but they stopped feeling urgent. You'll understand what you need to when you need to, he said gently. For now, you have your mission. Go back. Robert. Live differently than you did before. Love louder. Forgive faster. Speak truth boldly. And don't waste the time I'm giving you, because it's a gift. Every moment is a gift. The pulling became overwhelming, irresistible. The light around us began to fade. I could feel myself being drawn backward, away from Jesus, away from this place, back toward something cold and painful. Lord, I cried out as the distance between us grew. What if I fail? What if I mess this up? What if nobody listens and nothing changes? His final words echoed in my ears as everything turned bright white and then went completely black. You won't be alone, Robert. I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Pain exploded through my body like nothing I'd ever experienced. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a truck. Fire burned through my veins. Every nerve screamed in agony. Air rushed into my lungs, sharp and cold and burning. My back arched off the floor. My hands clenched into fists. Voices shouted around me, urgent and loud. I've got a pulse. He's back. Stay with us, sir. Can you hear me? Hands pressed hard on my chest, rhythmic and painful. Something covered my face, forcing air into my lungs. Bright light stabbed through my closed eyelids. The sounds were overwhelming after the perfect peace of where I'd been. Sirens wailing, people shouting instructions, equipment beeping, my son's voice crying out, Dad, please be okay. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw and blocked by something. All that came out was a choking sound. Don't try to talk, a professional voice said close to my ear. You've had a massive heart attack. We're taking you to the hospital. Just try to stay calm and let us help you. But I couldn't stay calm because the message was burning inside me, demanding to be released. I had to tell them. I had to make them understand. I forced my eyes open despite the blinding lights. Faces swam above me, paramedics in uniform, my son David with tears streaming down his face. Jesus, I managed to croak out, though it came out barely louder than a whisper. The paramedic exchanged a glance with his partner, that look medical people give each other when they think someone is delirious. Sir, you need to save your energy. Don't try to talk right now. We're going to take care of you. Jesus sent me back, I said, my voice growing a little stronger despite the pain. Trump. 2026. People need to know. They need to wake up. Dad, my son said, gripping my hand so tight it hurt. Don't talk. Just rest. You're going to be okay. They're going to fix this. But I shook my head as much as I could with the equipment around me. No, David, you don't understand. I died. I was gone. I met Jesus. He showed me things, important things about what's coming. I have to tell people. I have to warn them. The paramedics loaded me into the ambulance. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through my body, but I barely noticed because my mind was still half in that other place, still seeing the visions Jesus had shown me, still hearing his voice telling me what I needed to do. The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and voices and the wailing siren overhead. I kept fading in and out, slipping between consciousness and something deeper. Every time I surfaced, I tried to talk, tried to tell them about what I'd seen, but the words came out jumbled and confused. Finally someone gave me something for the pain, and everything went fuzzy and distant. I spent 11 days in the hospital. The cardiologist told me and my son that I'd been clinically dead for 40 minutes by the time the paramedics got my heart started again. They said it was impossible, that nobody survives that long without oxygen to the brain, and if they do survive they certainly don't wake up able to talk and think clearly. You should be a vegetable, the doctor said bluntly. You should have massive brain damage at minimum. But your scans are coming back normal. Your heart sustained serious damage, yes, but you're recovering at a rate I've never seen in someone your age. Frankly, Mr. Robert, I don't have a medical explanation for what I'm seeing. If I believed in miracles, I'd call this one. I smiled at him from my hospital bed. Doctor, I said, it is a miracle. God brought me back because he has work for me to do. The doctor didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded politely and left to check on other patients. But I knew the truth. Every breath I took was a gift. Every heartbeat was borrowed time given to me for a specific purpose. David stayed with me almost constantly during those 11 days. On the 5th night, when we were alone and the hospital had grown quiet, I told him everything. Every single detail from the moment my heart stopped to the moment it started again. I told him about standing in that place of light with a young body that didn't hurt. I told him about meeting Jesus face to face and the overwhelming love I felt. I told him about the visions of demons attached to people, of churches full of dead religion, of America caught in a battle between light and darkness. I told him about seeing Donald Trump standing in the center of the storm, holding a torch that flickered between gold and gray. I told him about the 2 possible timelines for 2026 and the choice that would determine which one unfolded. When I finished, David was quiet for a long time, just sitting in the chair beside my bed with tears running down his face. Dad, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. I believe you. I know how that sounds. I know people are going to think you're crazy, but I believe every word. And I think maybe this is why God let me have that feeling today. I almost didn't come check on you. I was at work and suddenly I just knew I had to leave right then. I couldn't explain it. I just knew. I broke speed limits getting to your house. And when I found you on the floor, you'd been down so long you were cold. The paramedics told me later they didn't think they could bring you back, but something made them keep trying longer than they normally would. It's all connected, Dad. God orchestrated all of it so you could come back and share this message. Will you help me? I asked him. Will you help me tell people what I saw? He nodded firmly. Yes. We'll figure out how together. Maybe we can make a video or something. Get the message out to as many people as possible. Because you're right. People need to hear this, especially now with everything that's happening in the world. They need to understand that this isn't about politics. It's about their souls. The Robert who came home from the hospital 2 weeks later was not the same man who died on his kitchen floor. Everything looked different now. Colors seemed brighter, more vivid. Food tasted better. The air felt cleaner. But more than the physical changes, something had shifted deep inside me. I could feel things I'd never felt before. When I talked to someone, I could sense their pain even when they smiled and said they were fine. I could feel when darkness was trying to creep into a conversation or a thought, and I'd learned to recognize it and push back. Most importantly, I could hear God's voice now, not with my physical ears but clearly in my spirit, like a gentle whisper guiding me through each day. Prayer became real for the first time in my life. Before, I'd recited memorized prayers or rambled through lists of requests like I was placing an order. Now I actually communicated with the living God. Sometimes I'd pray for hours and it would feel like minutes. The words flowed naturally, and I could feel God's presence, sense His responses, know that I was being heard. Reading the Bible transformed from a religious duty into desperate hunger. I couldn't get enough. Passages I'd read 100 times over 70 years suddenly burst with new meaning, like they were written specifically for me, answering questions I hadn't even asked yet. And I started talking to everyone who would listen. The nurses who came to check on me during my recovery heard the whole story. So did the mail carrier, the grocery store clerk, my neighbors, the guys I used to play cards with at the senior center, everyone at my church. Some people thought I was crazy. I could see it in their eyes, the way they'd smile politely and change the subject as quick as they could. Some listened with what seemed like genuine interest but then never brought it up again, like they'd filed it away as an interesting story but nothing that applied to their own lives. But others broke down in tears right there in front of me. A woman at the grocery store started sobbing when I told her about Jesus' message to wake up from spiritual sleep. She confessed she'd been going to church her whole life but felt empty inside, like something was missing. A man at the senior center admitted he was terrified about the political situation and what might happen to the country. And when I told him to stop trusting in politicians and start trusting in God, I saw the relief wash over his face like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to give him permission to let go of that fear. My pastor asked me to share my testimony with the church, and I stood up in front of the congregation, the same congregation I'd sat with for decades without really connecting, and I told them everything Jesus had shown me. I didn't hold back. I told them about the demons I'd seen in churches just like ours. I told them about religion without relationship and how most of us were playing church instead of actually knowing God. I told them that comfortable Christianity was over and God was calling for real surrender. Some people got angry. A few families left the church after that Sunday, saying I was being divisive and political. But many more came up to me afterwards with tears in their eyes, saying they'd felt the same emptiness I described and were ready to pursue something real. That's when things started to change at our church. People stopped showing up just to check a box. They came hungry for genuine encounter with God. Prayer meetings that used to draw 5 or 6 people were suddenly packed with 30 or 40. The worship shifted from performance to authentic praise. It wasn't about the lights or the production anymore. It was about actually connecting with the God we claim to serve. Now I need to tell you directly, whoever is watching this video, whatever brought you here, the message Jesus gave me is for you. Maybe you love Donald Trump and think he's going to save America. Maybe you hate him and think he's destroying everything. It doesn't matter which side you're on, because here's the truth. You're both wrong if you think Trump is the main issue. He's not your savior, and he's not your enemy. He's a man being used as a catalyst to reveal what's already in people's hearts. Stop putting your hope in him or any other politician. They can't save you. Stop putting your hope in him or any other politician. They can't save you. They can't fix what's broken in your soul. Only Jesus can do that. Pray for Trump. Genuinely pray for him, but don't worship him and don't demonize him. He's carrying a burden that would crush most people, and he needs prayer, not adoration or hatred. Maybe you're terrified of 2026, scared of what might happen politically, economically, socially. I'm 78 years old, and I don't know how much time I have left. Maybe a few months, maybe a few years. Only God knows. But I've never been more alive, more certain, more at peace than I am right now. Because I know beyond any shadow of doubt that Jesus is real. I've stood in his presence. I've looked into his eyes. I've felt his love. And I'm telling you that everything else, all the politics and possessions and achievements and arguments, all of it fades to nothing compared to knowing him. 2026 is not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a great awakening, if God's people will wake up first. Donald Trump is not your problem, and he's not your solution. He's a signpost pointing to a much bigger reality. My name is Robert. I'm 78 years old. I died for 40 minutes, met Jesus, and he showed me that 2026 isn't about Trump or politics or any human system. It's about you and the choice you make right now in this moment. Will you keep trusting in things that can't save you? Or will you finally surrender everything to the only one who can? Choose wisely. Choose quickly. Time is running out, and eternity is forever. Don't wait until you're on your own kitchen floor gasping for air and realizing too late that you never really knew the God you claim to serve. Do it now. Get on your knees right now, wherever you are, and have that honest conversation with Jesus. Tell him you're ready to stop playing games and start taking him seriously. He's waiting for you. He's always been waiting. And he loves you more than you can possibly imagine. That's the message. That's what Jesus sent me back to tell you. Now the choice is yours.